And I understand there is somebody that is listening to this right now. And you say to me, Ryan, you are a white male that has experienced a significant amount of privilege. And so particularly as it relates to this thing, you just don't have a clue. And so you can't contribute to this conversation. And I'm going to tell you, to everything leading up to that last statement, you're right. Though I may not be specifically informed or having stepped through that specific process, there are many others in this world that I can positively contribute towards. And so I will continue to use my voice. I will continue to use my platform. I will continue to self-reflect as often as humanly possible, to bear out all the garbage that's inside of myself, to be transparent about that, and to show people that I will continue to work to be good, to serve people well, to care for people, to forgive those that hurt me, to reconcile relationships, not just for the good of me, but for the good of you too.
Welcome to Authentic Conversations with Ryan James Miller. Join Ryan as he speaks with top business leaders and influencers, and hear how they've mastered the art of authenticity to achieve all that they dreamed of. As you hear from these leaders, seek not only to be inspired by their authenticity, but to strive for and master your own.
Let me kick this off with, I guess, some qualifying statements. I think it's fair to start this way and kind of set today up, because this is going to be quite a bit different than any of the past or previous 12 that I've done like this. So, for the last 13 weeks now, I've been setting aside about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour online to share just very practically tools, tips, my kind of thought and approach to leadership, relationship, sales, marketing, branding, so many different things. I did a session on LinkedIn. There's been quite a few different topics, clearly very business related or business centric. Even the Q&As that I've done for the most part have been very much in that same vein. Even when I'm talking about habit and discipline, it's often incorporated into the domain of business. And then we had a week, back really the last 2 weeks, we had some significantly greater challenges just as individuals than probably most of us have ever faced in our entire lives. If we weren't personally experiencing the challenge, it was a challenge that we were watching happen and trying to figure out how to navigate and how to deal with. And so I talked about that just a little bit last week at the beginning. But something that has really been on my heart and has really burdened me is that while we're interacting, you're here because of a business relationship, whether that's just you following me on a social media platform, or maybe we've done business together or have interacted at some point, we're still human beings. And each one of us is in some way interacting with or involved with or struggling through the season of life that we're in. 2020 has been brutal to say the least. And again, definitely far more difficult for some people than others. And so I just felt like now was a good time for me to speak from the heart more than ever. And I wanted to qualify when I sent out invitations, of which I did. If you got an invitation from me via email, in the Zoom invite before you registered, I qualified a couple of things. And, a couple of those things that I just want to reiterate right here is first and foremost, this conversation that I have, whether it's, one way in the sense you don't get to respond, but this is for everybody. Everybody's welcome to this table to have this type of conversation with me. I don't know everything clearly, but I'm just doing my best to contribute as positively as possible. The second thing is that there are some significantly difficult issues at play right here. We would have thought dealing with a pandemic would have been extremely difficult in and of itself. but now we are dealing with a far worse issue that has been prevalent in this country for more than 200 years, and it is rearing its ugly head again, and that is the general challenge and struggle we have had with just inequality, more specifically with racism and racism against Black people. And as a white human being, a white male for that matter, I understand that in many cases, I need to be a lot more quiet and just listen and receive and try and do the best that I can to understand and to help. And I've been doing that. I am no fool to believe that even if I had sat back and listened and learned for all 42 years of my life, that I would have any of this figured out, but I'm doing the best that I can. In the midst of that, I want to say that this morning is not about that specifically, even though this morning is related to that, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So I may say something that is not 100% accurate or does not 100% jive with you, that is not intentional. I'm trying to do my best to choose my words carefully because I have brothers and sisters of many different backgrounds, both ethnically, racially, sexually, and I want to do my best, not to tiptoe, but to truly care for and love them. The third thing, and the last thing before I get into this, and I'm sorry to have to do this, but I just want to be really clear here and be as helpful as possible. The third thing is as many of you know, I am a pastor of a church, and that in and of itself says really nothing at all, especially in today's day and age, but I am a Christian. I hold that very, very deeply. And so that means for me personally, this is not a prescription for you. This is a description of me. For me, that means that ultimately my faith lies in God above all else. And my faith is in Jesus Christ. I absolutely am convinced of the fact that it is Christ that died for my sins, that I needed that. And I'll get into that actually a little bit, not to evangelize you at all. That's not my intention here, but just to get you to understand where I'm coming from. But beyond that, when I seek truth, when I'm looking for ultimate truth, and in a world where it's just distorted in so many different ways, and even in the church, it can be totally distorted, my truth ultimately is founded on the Word of God as best as I can understand it. So there's going to be things that I'm going to say in a few minutes that are just going to come from that place. And again, I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not trying to get you to believe what I believe. I'm just trying to get you to understand where I'm coming from and where my approach is intended to go. So hopefully that's enough. Again, I just want to tell you up front, I'm sorry if I say something to offend you. That is not my intention at all today. My intention is to try and be helpful in us creating a path which I believe is going to be significantly beneficial for all of us, whether we're talking about issues of race, which is the most important one to talk about right now, or anything else for that matter down the line. Okay, so I think I got that out. I'm not 100% sure. By the way, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have concerns, if something that I say in the midst of what I'm saying is like, dude, this guy's crazy, drop it in the chat, drop it in the Q&A. I'm going to try and address those as I go. Or you can feel free to email me, Ryan at Ryan James Miller. You can text me, email me, and I'll send you my cell phone number. I don't want to do that because this is going to end up on too much of the internet after this. But please feel free to reach out to me. I'm down to any kind of dialogue, and I want to listen to your side. I want to listen to your perspective. I want to listen to what you have to say. This is not, again, about me trying to force feed something to you. Okay. So what do I really want to address today? So today the intention is to talk about forgiveness and reconciliation. And why is that so important to me specifically today? Over the last 4 or 5 months, really ever since the pandemic started, I've noticed an even more drastic shift in the way that people handle themselves, in the way that people are, in how kind they are. Sorry, I'm going to make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. It started far earlier. Much of this was telling in the 2016 election. People were choosing sides. It was ugly. It was ugly. And again, this goes back far longer than that. But I saw some of it there. Again, then when the pandemic hit, what I started to see was there was this division that was being created between two sides. One side was, this is all nonsense, and I want the freedom to just live the life that I want to live. The other side was, we are doomed, and if we don't completely shut down, just quarantine ourselves, shut everything down, we're all going to die. And people were literally having to pick a side. I mean, it was like, it was crazy just to watch. And one side was just attacking the other side. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why are we even choosing sides? Like, there's really people sick and dying. There's really businesses shutting down. There's really a lot of things that are going on. This was an uncharted territory for us as a country, as a world. In this specific regard, obviously we had dealt with pandemics in the past. Definitely in most of our lifetimes, this is the first time this has happened. And I was watching just people annihilate each other, like literally just annihilate each other, mocking each other with things they were sharing on social media, and backhanded affirmation of somebody. It's like up front, it's like, yeah, good idea to wear a mask, and then the message on the mask is like, all idiots wear masks, right? It was just like, it was terrible. It was terrible stuff. And so that's unfolding, and again, I'm going to say some things that are going to even implicate me inside of my own groups of people. I was even watching this in the church, and so I hate to have to say this, but I watched churches that were immediately attacking the government for preventing them from gathering together, like they were stifling their religious liberty. And that was absurd to me. It was absurd to me because it had nothing to do with religious liberty and everything to do with what they felt was the best approach to stopping this disease or this virus from spreading. And so brothers and sisters that I not necessarily go to church with, but am in community with in surrounding areas, like I was appalled by some of the things that they were saying and doing. Like, what a terrible witness to the love of Jesus when all you care about is gathering together, even though it's super important for churches to gather together. Anyway, so I'm just watching that in all kinds of domains. My heart was really weighing heavy through this, by the way. Then we see this series of events that culminates with the death of George Floyd. And I just go on record as saying, I don't care what led to the moment off of camera. I don't care whatever else was going on in society. I don't care about anything. What we watched happen was unequivocally, it was absolutely the act of one person taking another person's life. Plain as day. No question about it. And yet, again, I was watching people, friends, family, take sides. Well, you don't know what happened. Well, you don't know what led to that moment. I was just like, what? And what was interesting was so much of it was politically charged, right? Like, depending on what news channel you watch, depending on what, media you read, the things that you consume, the people you hang around with, like, you're just very influenced by that which you surround yourself with. It's the nature of life. And so then, obviously, protesting happened, which I believe was absolutely the right thing to do. Rioting happened. Terrible things were happening. Businesses are being destroyed. People were being killed. Right? It just got worse and worse and worse. And again, as all of this is happening, more sides are being chosen. Like, I personally, Ryan Miller, I am pro-police. The good ones. My dad was a police officer. Some of my closest friends are police officers, and they're wonderful human beings. They would never, ever, ever be classified in the same category as that a-hole that did what he did to George Floyd, or any of the other ones that commit those same awful crimes while being protected by a badge. Okay? At the same time, I am pro people. And in this case, specifically, I am pro Black people that have continued to be targeted for so many things over, again, just the last 200 years of this country's existence, but far longer than that. I don't have to choose a side. I can just be both. Now, I may have to speak up louder for one than the other because of the context or the conversation, but I don't have to choose sides. And so then we started to see things come out, right? Like people made distasteful comments and statements and conversation. I can't go here. Very prominent people. And we immediately just went on, I'm just talking generally, people just went on the attack without giving any kind of grace. And then when many people I watched would then apologize, they would just get destroyed. Like, nobody was going to accept their apology. Nobody was going to listen to what they had to say. Nobody was willing to forgive. And I was like, what is going on here? And I just started crying. I mean, no joke. From the day after I watched unfortunately, the video of George Floyd being killed, from that day forward, I cried almost every single day. I mean, almost every single day. And it was so heartbreaking. And again, like I'm only a distant observer to what's going on. But part of my heartbreak, like definitely when my heartbreak was his death. But part of my heartbreak was, here we are divided. Here we are witness to inequality in its most evil and demonic way. And our answer is inequality. Mistreatment of people. And please hear me, I'm not trying to classify those as one and the same thing. The issues with racism are far greater than the issues with people, peeing in each other's cereal bowl or hurling insults at each other on social media. I'm not saying those are one and the same things. But I firmly believe that at the root of the problem, or at the root, is the same problem. The same thing that causes us to be hateful towards somebody of another race, religion, sexual orientation, or anything else, political party, the same hate is the hate that causes us to hurl the insults that we do and to lack forgiveness, even in the greatest of situations. And so what I wanted to do with the remaining time is to walk you through a story. And this is just very personal. But I think it's helpful for you to understand where I'm coming from as it relates to forgiveness. And what I have learned, and hopefully in some small fraction, you can take to your network, to your community, to your workplace, to your family, whatever. Again, very different than a lot of what I've talked about in the past. Even to this point, you can probably see. So, my parents divorced when I was 6 years old. I didn't quite know at the time why, but I did see that within weeks of my dad leaving, my mom, my 6-year-old self, and my 3-year-old younger brother, within weeks, we saw his new girlfriend. Little did I know years later that was the result of my dad cheating on my mom. And there was other issues there. Neither of them were a peach. There was a lot to work on, but for whatever reason, my dad left. And So we went on to live, living with my mom full time. We saw my dad on the weekends. I didn't realize until much later, but my mom worked 2 and 3 jobs just to put food on the table for my brother and I. My dad was of no additional help other than what the court ordered. It was just very ugly in the way things went. And so, we ate macaroni and cheese and bread and butter multiple nights a week because that's all my mom could afford. And we didn't have new school clothes. We often wore the same clothes for quite a long time, and we didn't go on vacations, and we just didn't get to do things because my mom was just fighting to survive by working whatever job she could. We would go down to my dad's on the weekends, and we had all kinds of stuff. Motorcycles, motorhome, boat. It was awesome. As a kid, at least it was. It just totally looked forward to that. And life went on, continued to grow up. I actually moved in with my dad for a couple of years, a year and a half in high school. That did not go well. That was not a good decision. My dad got married. My stepmom is amazing, one of the greatest women I've ever known in my entire life. To this day, I love her to death. But my dad and I just butted heads. It didn't work, and so I moved back home, and my dad and I ended up getting into a significant conflict that was really the culmination of me realizing all that happened in my upbringing, the fact that he left the way that he did, that he left us with so little, that he was so hurtful and hateful towards my mom, that caused my brother and I to suffer, and it was like he didn't even see it. And I know that he loved us. He was just so overcome with hatred towards my mom that it caused us a lot of harm and a lot of hurt and a lot of loss. We still, we were okay, but it was a lot. So that was all kind of coming to a head. My dad and I had a couple of head-to-head arguments. And so the last time that I spoke to my dad was on my wedding night. I was 21 years old. I think I was 21 years old. Almost 22. I actually didn't even want to invite him to my wedding. My mom, my biological mom, she felt like that was the right thing to do, so she forced that issue. But that was the last time I saw my dad, spoke to my dad for 10 years. In the very beginning, it was a little bit hard. And then as time went on, I stopped acknowledging him as my dad. I didn't want to talk about him. Every once in a while, my mom would ask me, hey, have you talked to your dad lately? And I'm like, I don't even know who you're talking about. My stepdad, whom my mom remarried a few times later, great human being, and he stepped into that role, not to replace my dad, just to be there for us. And so I would just say, that's my dad, and that's who I looked up to, and that's who's supporting me and fighting for me and helping to shape me into who I am. And I was also just a pompous, cocky, immature, early 20-something kid, trying to figure out life. And so that went on for 10 years. It got so bad that I didn't know this until later, but my dad was on a work project, got shipped overseas, and was in Iraq during the war, shortly after September 11th, 2001. One night in particular, he took a rocket just a few feet from the bunker that they were hunkered down in, and they almost died. And one of the first calls that my dad made was to me. And it's hard to talk about. We didn't answer the phone. And I remember hearing his message, and he was crying on the phone, telling me that he loved me, that he just wanted to talk to me. He just wanted to reconnect. And I was so angry and so hurt and so calloused over because all those years had gone by that I didn't even acknowledge it. I don't even think I was really upset in the moment. And that went on, and it went on, and in 2006, as the result of my marriage having some troubles, we'd been married 5 years at that point, we decided to attend a church, which we had not done before. We came to faith in Jesus, and that started to do this just really transformative work in my life. It took a long time. It's still taking a long time, but slowly God was just working on my heart. And so that was 2006, probably 2008. And trust me when I tell you, like, this all has a purpose and has a point. In 2008, I went to a men's retreat. And the speaker, the topic of that retreat was forgiveness and reconciliation. And I didn't know that until we got up there. And so he spoke, and he talked about the pain and even the evil and destruction of living with unforgiveness in your heart. And so that convicted me. It convicted me to forgive my dad. And so in 2008, October-ish, I forgave my dad. Up here. And a little bit in here. I just resolved in my own heart that I was going to forgive him. And that was that. This is no joke. I'm not into like overly spiritualizing things, but a year goes by, 2009. Same men's retreat, different year, but same retreat with our church at the time. I am there, and this time we're talking about something totally different, manly men, or I don't know, something. But one of the things that's shared is this idea of a lack of true forgiveness. And that was the first moment that I realized that I had never truly understood what forgiveness meant. And here's what was crazy. And again, for any of you that like you attend church, faith in God, you get this in the church setting. Some of you may get this outside of that, but all in all, this was foreign to me. But I finally came to this place when I realized that I had asked for forgiveness from God for all the things I had done in my life up to that point, with the expectation that I would be forgiven, because that's what I was told that the Bible said. And yet, I couldn't even forgive my dad. I mean, I did here and a little bit here, but it wasn't really real. And so I wrote him a letter. And in that letter, a couple pages long, I still have it to this day, kind of ashamed of it actually, I wrote a list of every single thing that I forgave my dad for. Which again was just in some way me just making sure that he knew how many ways he hurt me. I wanted to make sure he felt it. Like if there was ever a chance of me forgiving him, he had to feel how painful it was for what he did to me. I mean, that kind of sounds okay to some degree. And yet I would come to realize a whole nother year later that wasn't forgiveness. That was me just making sure they felt guilty for what they did. And in that sense, my dad felt guilty for what he did. I wouldn't ever really know what that would feel like again. By the way, early 2011, I reconnected with my dad. We sat down in a BJ's restaurant in Temecula, California, and I will never forget what it felt like to hug my dad for the first time in 10 years. I will never, ever forget that feeling of knowing that we were committed to doing our best to wipe away the past and to commit to move forward together. We now have an amazing relationship. He lives out of state. I don't get to see him that often, but I die for every time that I get the opportunity to see him. I would have one more opportunity to step through something like this. And that was, many of you know my story. It's at the Route 91 concert, Las Vegas, October 2017. And I watched my friend be murdered in cold blood. Like I didn't watch her get shot, but I watched the result of her being shot. I watched her take her last breaths. And I remember the phone call confirming that that was in fact it. And in the months to come, as I was interviewed for CNN and People Magazine and so many others, especially because like people know how to pry in certain areas, you know, especially because once people knew that I was a pastor, they always wanted to dig in, like, so do you hate that person? And this is not me speaking in some overtly righteous way, because trust me when I tell you I am not. I can list out 1,000 reasons why you would be embarrassed for me. But I just didn't hate him. I hated what happened. I was disgusted with what happened. And I would do just about anything that I could to take that all away. But as we talked about that situation, I began to realize that there were very clear reasons why a human being would do something like that. The brokenness inside of them, the hurt that they faced, the struggles that they went through, maybe as a child, the distorted upbringing, the alienation from people even as an adult, the mental health issues, so many things. A broken system that allows somebody to accumulate way too many weapons. Like just so many things all led to that situation. Yes, that person committed the crime. And it would take me a lot to stare that person in the face and tell them that I accept your apology. But that's something that I would strive to do. Look, as we see all that we're seeing going on in society right now, I'm afraid that we have detached humanity from our interactions. We see people as objects, as parties, as positions. Again, like I don't want to be on this train too hard because I don't feel like I'm in the right place to do that. But we should absolutely see the beauty, I believe, in God creating every single person unique. And so I'm not colorblind. I appreciate my black friends and my brown friends 100% for who they are and who God has made them to be. But seeing them that way doesn't make me classify them in some certain way. I don't want to see people as just something. I want to see them as a human being. I think the second component to why we struggle so hard to forgive is because I don't think many people truly want what's best for the whole. This is why retribution, this is why retaliation happens so often. We're so angry about a life being taken that the only response is to take a life. Now, I believe in, at least for the most part to this point, in our ability to bear arms in this country. I believe in the right to protect my family from harm, to protect other people from harm. But I don't ever think that the way we solve a death is by creating another one. That the way we fix hatred is by just being hateful. In our mission to change this world, Gandhi, one of my favorite quotes, be the change that you want to see in this world. As you step through these types of conversations, and again, this doesn't necessarily have to relate what's going on in our country. This could be a relationship that you have with your dad. Are you stepping into those environments time and time and time again? Like, it's exhausting to have these conversations. It's exhausting to step through real forgiveness and reconciliation. Are you willing to do what's right? Are you willing to model an example of positive change? And I don't for a second believe that this is easy, or it's clean, or it's simple, or there's a single answer to solve all of the problems that we're facing. There's not. But I do know, without a doubt, that one of the best ways that I can prevent it from going farther is to look into my own heart and soul and rip apart the evil, the hatred, the hurt that I'm projecting onto other people. Because popping off at my kid because I got frustrated because they asked for ice cream too many times, that's just a really small version of the hatred that we see going on in the world right now, that the media indoctrinates us with every single day. We have to see each other as human beings. And we have to truly seek out good, not good with a whole bunch of qualifications. Not good ifs. We need to seek good, knowing that there will be ifs. Because nothing's ever going to be clean. And as we continue to put all these people together and try and fix some of the problems or all of the problems, it's going to be messy. So forgiveness definitely happens as we look to the world out there, that we see people as people, and that we are desiring for what's best. But beyond that, I've alluded to some of this as I've been talking, is, and I can't believe that we're not at 0 people anymore, because I figured you'd be tired of me talking about this by now. But as we think about how we are going to begin to forgive, we absolutely have to start off by recognizing that we are part of the problem. Now, I am very, very careful when I accuse somebody of being part of the problem in the specific sense. Because again, you probably, just because it's the most relevant topic, hopefully you're not a racist. And so you may not be part of the problem of racism specifically. But there's something else that you're negatively contributing to the story. Or if not to that story, to another one. And so you're not part of this problem, you're part of that problem. We're all fallible human beings. We all make mistakes. And too often we look at our mistakes as being far, far less than somebody else's. And yes, committing murder is far worse than telling a lie. But at the end of the day, it's the same root cause. We're just screwed up. We're all trying to do our best, but we've got to admit that there's stuff going on inside of us that needs to be worked on, that we need to grow from. And wherever you seek to find that growth, go do that. The other thing that we need to agree to is that it's not just that we're messed up and we've made mistakes, but that we will continue to make mistakes. Like you are, I don't know what planet you're on if you don't believe that you are not going to continue to hurt people, that you're not going to continue to contribute to some problem in society, that you're not going to be hateful at some point. Like, it's going to happen. And so that's why we need to constantly be aware of where our tendencies lie, where our hatred is at, where our hot button points are. Like our jealousy, our own selfish ambition, our desire to divide. And oftentimes our desire to divide is not actually a desire to divide as much as it's an opportunity, or we see it as an opportunity to rally for the cause. But in doing so, we're dividing instead of bringing people together. Yes, a group of you may do a better job of making a positive impact on something that you're trying to do, but don't alienate the other quote unquote side. We don't need to draw lines in the sand. I wish that I had this reference, and unfortunately some of this stuff comes to me in the midst of this, and so again I can misspeak. Watch a great documentary on Netflix this last year, a Middle Eastern woman that went and spent time with the KKK. Or members of the KKK. One of the most disgusting, awful groups of people that this world has to offer. And it was fascinating to watch her step through life with them. And it was beyond beautiful to see some of the positive outcomes of people's perspectives on one another through the time that she spent and invested into being with them. And she had very different ideals, very different philosophies on life than they did, clearly. It was amazing. Not everybody changed, but she made a positive impact. So maybe I'll drop that. I'll find that. I'll send that out as a follow-up when I send out this recording. There is no line that we can't cross in a desire to make positive change. And as a matter of fact, and again, like, I'm not justifying what has been said, I'm not justifying what's been done, but if you listen to somebody like Kevin Hart talk about the negative publicity that he received leading up to the Oscars, which led him to not host the Oscars. Particularly, he was on Joe Rogan's podcast just recently talking about it. And it's unbelievable how even after not just verbal apology, but actions for years and years that demonstrate that in the very least, he made a crude comment, and in the very worst, even if he did believe what he communicated with his whole heart, that he has completely changed, and he's actually advocating for the communities that were hurt by what he said. That doesn't take away from what he said, but it demonstrates a character that desires to change, desires to grow, desires to bridge the gap. And yet there were still people that wanted to hang him out to dry. They weren't going to accept his apology. They were going to continue to treat him as a hateful human being. It's so sad. We've got to be able to extend forgiveness. We've got to be able to walk that path with people. If not, we're going to continue to see brokenness in society forever. We can't divide over these issues. We must recognize that in knowing we're part of the problem, we can also be part of the solution. We can push farther in extending our desire to forgive and actually proving and showing that we can forgive other people. And by the way, forgiveness does not mean absolute agreement. We can still have different political stances. And by the way, I consider myself to be objectively political. I don't register Republican. I don't register Democrat. I do vote. I do actively vote. I try to pay as good of attention as possible. If somebody on one side or another offends me, I'm gonna do everything I can to forgive them, even though we're not going to agree. Like, there's going to be people that could hurt me, and at the same time, they could still believe that there's gray in what happened with George Floyd. I don't understand how you come to that conclusion. I don't understand why you would think that. I don't see how that's possible. And yet at the same time, if that person truly sought forgiveness for whatever it is they did to offend me, hurt somebody around me, I'm going to do everything that I can to accept that and to step forward to reconcile that relationship. We're just not going to agree on everything. We just see things differently. And yes, there are certain things that, not in the way I've been talking about, but there are certain things that we see as black and white. Like literally it's just one way or another, right? I don't even know if we should be using that statement anymore. Anyway, cut and dry, right? Just one way or another. And yet, even in those, we've got to find ways to forgive. We've got to find ways to walk through towards forgiveness. The other thing, forgiveness doesn't require equal effort. You hope it does. I mean, like, your act of forgiveness often comes as the result of somebody asking for it, apologizing. But that's not always the case. And that should not be what we're waiting for. Like, until you truly mean it, until you do everything that I've asked you to do, until you come all the way to my side, I'm not going to forgive you. Seek forgiveness. Seek opportunities to reestablish those relationships, to bridge those gaps. And by the way, everything that I've said to this point, one of the best ways that we can positively contribute to this, a lot of times, is doing this objectively, right? We're a bystander watching two other people that are going at it. And there's this lack of forgiveness and reconciliation because they're just on two completely different sides. Well, when we stand as an objective bystander, we can oftentimes speak a little bit more clarity into that situation and help people to bridge that gap. We can do a better job. Because ultimately we're trying to get to this place of reconciliation, not just forgiveness, right? Forgiveness is, I accept your apology for what you did, I've forgiven you, or I've forgiven you for what you've done. Well, reconciliation is going a step farther than that, and I'm just about done, by the way. Reconciliation is this idea of making our beliefs compatible with one another and or restoring relationship. Making our views compatible or restoring relationship. Democrats and Republicans, they are both ultimately after mostly the same things. The good of the people. How they go about that, certain people in there, right? There's a lot to be said there. But ultimately, they're after the good of the people. How they go about that is far different. As we seek free equality across gender, race, many of us have very different perspectives, some more personal than others, and approaches to how this is going to happen. But in the end, most people want to see all things equal. So we shouldn't attack each other because somebody is doing something differently than somebody else. We should be trying to reconcile those two people together, those two groups together, to bring them together. We have far greater strength and power in unity than we do as individuals. And yet, everything is divided now, right? You have to pick a side. Are you this or are you this? Are you for this or are you for that? As a matter of fact now, it's if you're for this, then I'm against you, right? When we're on different sides. If you're not for me, you hate me. Let's try to not go there. Let's try to recognize that ultimately we are for people, that we are for the best in people. But it's got to start again with us, recognizing all the ways, regardless of the topic, in which we're negatively contributing to the situation, that we're willing to forgive, that we're open to forgive, that we're stepping through the process of forgiveness. And ultimately, our forgiveness is not telling somebody all of the things that they did to offend us to feel good about ourselves. But instead, it's walking the path towards reconciliation. Because that's what we want more than anything. We want to live in families. We want to work in workplaces. We want to be around communities. And ultimately, we want to live in a country, in a world where people get along. But we can't do that if we have all this pent-up hatred towards each other. And I understand there is somebody that is listening to this right now, or you're going to listen to this later, and you look at me talking about things like this at a time like this, and you say to me, Ryan, you are a white male that has experienced a significant amount of privilege. And so particularly as it relates to this thing, you just don't have a clue. And so you can't contribute to this conversation. And I'm going to tell you, to everything leading up to that last statement, you're right. I don't get a lot of it. But I'm going to try and do my best to contribute positively to that conversation. Because I'm not going to sit back and watch as the people that I love destroy each other. And on top of that, though I may not be specifically informed or having stepped through that specific process, there are many others in this world that I can positively contribute towards. And so I will continue to use my voice. I will continue to use my platform. I will continue to self-reflect as often as humanly possible, to bear out all the garbage that's inside of myself, to be transparent about that, and to show people that I will continue to work to be good, to serve people well, to care for people, to forgive those that hurt me, to reconcile relationships, not just for the good of me, but for the good of you too. You've got to be shedding tears when you see what's going on in this world. And inside of yourself, you've got to be desiring to change. The world out there, but also the heart in here. Thank you guys giving me the space to personally rant a little bit this morning. I'm extremely passionate about this, as you can tell. I'm learning. I'm growing. I have a lot of ground to cover. And I will continue to do my best to be a positive contribution to conversations like this and any other one that continues to help people live the life that I believe they've been created to. And the life many people are living right now is not the one they've been created for. So thank you so much. Appreciate you guys today. Anybody else that will listen to this, again, my offer's on the table. You want to dialogue around something like this, please feel free to email me, ryan@ryanjamesmiller.com, and we can set up some time. So thank you guys.
Thank you for listening to Authentic Conversations with Ryan James Miller. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and share it with others. To connect with Ryan and learn more, visit ryanjamesmiller.com.